Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Talking Cardboard. My name is Corey.
I'm John.
And I'm Nick.
And in today's review, we are reviewing the new game by Stefan Feld and Pegasus Spiel called Civolution. Let's get started. As always, if you enjoy the content you see here on the channel, please feel free to subscribe and leave comments below if you've played Civolution before and what some of your thoughts are on it as well. So, starting with John, can you explain kind of the basics of what we're doing in Civolution?
Yeah, there's a lot going on in this game. There are 16 different actions you can take each turn depending on the dice you roll, matching those up with the actions. But at its core, what you're trying to do is go from, the starting point of your civilization, explore out into this world through, moving your tribes around, building settlements, farms, other buildings, researching from these various decks, technologies that you can use to expand your civilization, and then ultimately the goal of the game is to score points through exploration, completing goals, practicing religion, and then going up on these technology tracks, as well as some random goals that are sprinkled into the game.
Yeah, and there is a lot going on with this game. It's definitely a table hog. Once we get going, I guess we'll get into the pros. I'll start with Nick here, but I just wanted to say and preface it with, yes, this looks like a lot, but the game does tend to flow once you get the hang of it, but it's more of an open world concept with a lot of different decisions you can make. So Nick, what are some of your favorite parts of the game?
Well, one thing that I appreciate about this game that John touched on is your rolling dice, which will basically determine what actions you have available depending on what dice you roll, because every action essentially requires 2 dice of specific values. And what that does is it does kind of limit you in terms of what you can do on your turn. And I actually kind of like that because there are a lot of Euro games that give you every action available to you, and that kind of overwhelms me. So I kind of appreciate the fact that you are more limited, and I think this streamlines gameplay too, because it decreases that analysis paralysis. Like if you only have 2 dice remaining, this is the one action I can do. And there is some mitigation with the die rolls too. But
through the ideas, which allow you to increase the die rolls by 1 value for each idea you spend. And then you also have focus tokens, which basically can be the value of any die.
Pretty much like a wild die or wild action.
Yep.
But like Nick said as well, each action takes 2 dice to complete. So it's kind of like Castles of Burgundy, another Stefan Feld game where you're just rolling dice and doing actions with those dice. Like Nick said too, that is one of my pros with the game, is that it does kind of narrow the scope of the gameplay for your turn. You don't have all the actions open to you all at the same time, but there is enough mitigation in the game to where it feels flexible enough to complete what you need to complete.
Yeah, and I like that because it really causes you to think how to best utilize those die to do actions that are actually going to be beneficial towards the goals or the technologies that you're trying to slot into your board to score points.
Yeah. And touching on the theme in this game, it is a Euro game, so typically theme isn't quite poured into the concept of the design itself, but I think the theme was done fairly decent in this. I know it's called Civolution. It's a play on essentially you're these deities, or I think you're these higher powers or alien powers that are trying to run your own civilization the best you can, and essentially trying to run like an automated type system to see what would happen if you were to actually create your civilization the best you can. And it does play out very well. It looks like a module or like a digital module you're kind of playing around with. Another pro with that too is that the board is variable. You can play the static setup as more of a basic game. This last time we played it in the advanced setup where everything is randomized and it creates for a new experience every time.
It really did, and it actually increased the challenge because the base setup, you have access to wood and papyrus right out of the gate. Those resources are really used in kind of like the basic settlements that you can build, which settlements get you these income shifts, which help, progress your civilization much quicker by getting those. So not having access to potentially either of those at the start of the game really just creates a whole new game experience, which I enjoyed. I mean, I needed the papyrus really badly, but that just forced me into a strategy of either finding ways to buy it or explore and find it on the board.
Another thing that's really cool as well are these research cards. There are 5 different types of research cards, and it's really unique the way the design was built out to where there are different tiers or different levels to building them up. And the higher you can build up your column of cards, the more points you score at the end of the game. But also, there are varying degrees of difficulty depending on which level in the column they're placed in as well.
Yeah, I'll agree with you, Corey, on that one. I do really like it. So basically on your player board, you have X amount of columns, and once you start researching these cards and putting them into a column, that column is now locked to that type of card or gold chips or whatever other chips there's in the game. There's innovations and income chips, but income chips are wild. But it really dictates how you're going to progress your civilization. So, for example, if you start out researching a building card in Tier 1, well, now to get to Tier 2 or 3, you're really stuck into going after heavily those building research cards versus, you could go, oh, I'm only going to mutate once, put that into your Tier 3 slot, and boom, you're just done. You've locked that in. You're going to be scoring some points, but now you don't necessarily need to keep mutating your civilization.
And it's definitely a game where you don't want to diversify yourself too much because you can really kind of pigeonhole yourself into not scoring a lot of points. You want to specialize in certain things, so that's a part of the fun of the game too.
And going back to that, even with the research cards and specialization and these attribute tokens you can get, one of the things on your player board are inherent attributes of your civilization, like stamina, intelligence, perception, wisdom, which help you, depending on how far you've leveled up that attribute, either get research cards onto your board, or you get, depending if you get enough, the attribute chips are really hard to get, but they're very powerful because, one, it's a free action to take one, and two, they provide a static bonus to your civilization for the rest of the game. And generally, they're very good bonuses.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to touch on that I appreciate for this game is the amount of player interaction. I felt that was the right amount. Because of every player has their own player board of actions, you're never worrying about taking the same action as someone else because you always have your actions available to you, unlike other Euro games. And for the most part, other players can't mess with your strategy that much. There are certain instances in the game where maybe you move or you explore before someone else. There are certain things you could do before someone else, take a goal before someone else. But I think for the most part, you're able to determine the strategy you want to do and follow it and not have to worry too much that the other players are going to mess things up. But there is still some interaction, so it's not like you're only playing a solo game with other people. There definitely still is player action and insight. That's why I felt it's the right amount.
Yeah, and there's some more indirect player interaction as well that plays into a lot of the strategy as far as discovering new resources. If you're purchasing resources, there's an action called trade, which you can buy and sell resources essentially. And if it's undiscovered, it costs 4 gold. If it's a discovered resource, it costs 2. So if you're kind of trying to play into what you need and seeing what your opponents are needing as well, that could play into some indirect player interaction depending on who's doing more migration and that sort of thing. So if I see John going one way toward a land type that I need discovered, I might just let him do that and not waste my actions on that. So I liked a lot of that indirect player interaction as well. So John and I have played this game about 4 times now. We can definitely get into more in-depth strategy in another video, but coming from Nick's perspective, I believe this last time was your first time playing the game. Are there any other pros you could see or any drawbacks or clunkiness with it?
Well, the one additional thing that I enjoyed about the game was it's rather forgiving in the fact that you are forced into taking actions, and almost any action is going to have a potentially pretty good outcome. You never feel like you're completely wasting a turn. Even when you have 2 dice and you have to do what's called the sleep action, you're still progressing. And even if you are forced into doing something that you weren't intending to do, like when you have doubles of a die, you can choose to get an attribute. And even if that's not necessarily a strategy, if you get enough attributes, then you can get those attribute goals.
Yep.
So you can always venture off in a direction and you can change your direction during the course of the game, which I appreciated as a new player because I didn't feel like I hurt myself after that very first round of the game. In terms of challenges or things that I wasn't so fond of, it is a die rolling game, so there are certain things that, a lucky find is an action you can do, and I was trying to find some jade, and you can spend your full action on trying to do a lucky find, and if you're not lucky, you're out of luck. That might rub some people the wrong way, but it's an action you don't obviously have to take. You can choose if you want to, take a lucky roll. Yeah. And your initial, when you do a reset action to roll your die for your actions, you can kind of get screwed over there to an extent, but there are ways to mitigate those dice. So that's just one thing that makes this game unique, is that from other Euro games is you are dependent on the rolls of the dice to an extent.
And there's a few RNG elements to this game through the research cards that come up, when players are resetting and when a round ends is variable, and then the dice rolling. But again, yeah, it's a minor critique because there's way to mitigate all those issues. And yeah, I guess that's part of the fun of the game, is trying to overcome those hurdles and still progress your civilization.
So some of that luckiness in the game could be also a pro and kind of play into the theme a little bit as well, because there are, those random discoveries that you were talking about, or you are trying to essentially go to locations sometimes to hunt there before your opponents can hunt at that spot. Once a location is hunted, it cannot be hunted again. And then that plays into how many of the pink dice do you have to go hunting, and to kind of mitigate your luck with that as well. So it definitely plays into the theme. This is very thematic, and there's the events and different weather cards and that sort of thing. So I could definitely tell that Stefan Feld tried to pour some theme into this one. John, any other pros before we start going into some cons?
Like you said, you have the favor to Angara. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but essentially that gives you better rolls or odds to roll a success for like actions that have a bonus based on how you roll, or like Corey said, hunting. And also, I really do like the event deck. It didn't do me any favors this last game, because my strategy going in was hoping for cards that got us into the hot or warm weather types, and we just went completely the other direction.
Frozen
but
tundra.
It's another thing you have to work around and think about in order to best give your odds to have the best civilization through the special events that trigger.
Yeah. After our 4 times playing the game now, any cons that you could potentially see with this game?
Like I mentioned, the RNG could be a turnoff for some folks. I know it frustrates me at times, but I wouldn't say for me it's a con. It's just something I have to work through and figure out how to mitigate through the idea of focus tokens, or just the way I sequence my actions. Otherwise, probably just the play time. It can be a long game. The flow goes pretty well because there's not a ton of player interaction, so you could just be taking your turns one after the other, especially when people are resetting. You don't really have to wait around for that.
Yeah, and it is a table hog. It is a bear to set up. It does take quite a bit of time to set up and tear down, so definitely a turn back on that as well. And then another con that I could kind of see for a lot of people too is that just the scope of the game is so broad. There is so many things to do. Obviously, the dice kind of mitigate what actions you can do, but there are statues you can build. There's farms. There's boats you can build. There's so many things going on. The weather affects certain things. There's goals here, goals there, goals over here, goals over there, and there are so many things to pay attention to. It's almost difficult to pay attention to what your opponents are going after. Sometimes you have to kind of head down and focus on what you're doing, and that kind of lends to it being a point salad game too. You almost feel like you're getting points for everything in this game, no matter what you do. It kind of balances and even outs by the end of the game, but I think with more plays, I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with that. But the first couple plays of this game, there's just so much to keep track of. So, Nick, any cons for you on this?
Yeah, to kind of work off of what Corey was just saying, I won my first game, and I didn't really know what I was doing, and I always feel if I'm winning a game that I don't know what I'm doing, that says a little bit about the design of the game, in that they, like Corey was just saying, there's just so many ways to score points that, and that's what was happening for me. I wasn't really going in the game with this very concrete strategy, since I didn't exactly understand the game, and was still able to get enough points through various means to end up with the lead at the end. So I kind of agree to an extent that there's almost too many ways to score points in this game. And to build off that more, I didn't really feel like I was working towards an engine per se. I was kind of just following the goals that I had in front of me and going for those goals. I wasn't like focused on trying to engine build like you'd see in other types of Euro games. And I kind of appreciate that side of Euro games when you by the end of the game you're like doing this huge mega action, whereas in Civolution you're only ever doing one action. Now you can upgrade the effects of some of those actions over the course of the game, and maybe instead of moving one meeple for migration, you're moving 2 meeples, but you're only ever doing that one action. So that was something that maybe disappointed me a little bit too with the game, but again, on the flip side, it does keep the game running quickly throughout the full four rounds of gameplay. So
Yeah, to kind of speak on that point too, it is kind of a slow burn or a slow build to get those actions, or to upgrade the actions, but that could be a little bit of just we've only played the game a few times, you've only played it once. Maybe as you get better, you can be a little bit more focused or a little bit more narrow-minded on your goal and strategize around the cards that are coming up and be able to engine build a little bit better with that. But you kind of find yourself wanting to play with the module more just to see what's going to happen, more so than being as focused as maybe you should be. At least I can sense that myself. All right, starting with the newbie, Nick, final thoughts on the game and your overall rating from 1 to 10.
So if you're familiar with our channel and with me specifically, you know I'm not much of a Euro gamer. So keep that in mind with my rating. I just am not necessarily the biggest Euro fan. So with that said, comparing this to other Euro games I've played, I would still give it between a 6 and a 7. And the reason I'm giving it, I'm saying for me higher, is because I do. The theme connects with me. I didn't feel like things were arbitrary all the time, which some Euro games, that's how it feels. In this game, things made sense. When you use the procreation action, you get a meeple next to a meeple you already have. When you're producing, you get goods from where your meeples are located and that type of good. So a lot of things connected with me. I like that part of the game. But at the end of the day, I still felt the scoring system at the end seemed a little on the arbitrary side, and that's why I only... I'm going up to a 7 at most for this.
John, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things going for this game. Some things we didn't mention is the replayability obviously is incredibly high. I mean, I've played this a handful of times and I still don't know what my favorite strategy is or what I want to do. I just want to play it again to try something different, to look at the research cards I have available to me, dive into what I can do with that. I mean, I took cards for this game that I thought I was going to dive into, didn't end up using them. So that threw me through a loop, but just figuring out how to mitigate that is really a lot of fun, and doing that over. I mean, I don't feel like playing this game again. I'd be like, oh, I'm just going to do this again, and that's what I'm going to do. It's like, oh, no, I should try this and focus in on this XYZ. Other things we haven't talked about that maybe is a knock is that, I don't know, I feel like it's actually not that hard to teach. There is a lot going on, but the way to play the game, once you've seen it, is actually pretty straightforward.
And the phases are laid out real well, too.
Yep. Right on the board, you just step through it with a little phase marker. Boom. Easy. I know we've mentioned it's a little point salad-y, but I actually like that. I mean, you're progressing your civilization, and you're getting points for doing that through various ways. So I feel like that actually adds to the theme, because, you know, exploring maybe is less points than, you know, researching something really cool and filling out, you know, the knowledge base of your civilization gives you more points, which that makes sense. But you're still getting points for doing something with your civilization. So for me, I'd give this a 9 out of 10, with really the only drawback from being a 10 is this is going to be hard to get to the table. So I definitely recommend it. I'd play it with, you know, the Talking Cardboard crew, but this isn't a game I'd probably bring to like a casual work gathering, unless I knew it was going to be a lot of just die-hard gamers there.
Right.
So
one thing, though, I want to make sure we give this game credit for, and going off what John was saying, is it's very well done in the standpoint it's straightforward to play. We didn't really have to pause and read the rule book at all.
No,
and I never really even had many questions in my very first play of the game because it just came straightforward. The iconography makes a lot of sense. Like, this game, given how much depth this game has, is extremely straightforward to play, and I think that deserves a lot of credit. So anyway, I wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's a real good point. That kind of brings me into my final thoughts as well. Is it does feel like a sandbox game with a bunch of different things going on, but everything is laid out so nice and neatly. The boards are really cool as well. How all the different upgradable modules fit into the board, and it just the presentation is just so nice and straightforward and easy to play, streamlined to play. And my biggest thing in my final thoughts here with the game is that I do feel like it is that sandbox that you can play with, and it's got so much variability, but I also feel like this is going to be the opposite of any other expansion suggestion I could ever think of for a game, but to also actually tone it back and have maybe some variable scenarios where you use a little bit less of the content to kind of narrow it into more of a focused scope, or this is what I'm going to try to do this game, or maybe throw various missions into it. Like this is the overall goal. There's so much you can do with this game. It just feels like a modular system of a game, and they just threw everything in with the kitchen sink all at once. But I feel like they could tone it back and trim the fat in some areas, and just you can bring it, like you said, you can't really bring it to like your work functions or people who don't play games as often, because they don't really have a streamlined, toned back version of this game quite yet, or a variable way to play, or a variant on the game itself. But having said that, I'm coming in at a 9 out of 10 as well. I'm right there with John. This game is fantastic. What's keeping it from the 10 out of 10, like John said also, is that it's just going to be very hard to get to the table. Long setup time, long teardown, long time to play the game, and it's really going to appeal to more of a certain type of gamer or a certain type of game group as well. You really can't bring this to the table each and every time we sit down to play games. So having said that, 9 out of 10. I am really looking forward to see what else might come out for it, and you all have a great day.